The condo had just been completely remodeled. My husband changed the locks so his mother could move in and forced me to serve her. I didn't argue. I simply sold the house in silence. The very next day, my husband collapsed on the floor. "Where is the house?" The day we finished renovating our new home, my husband took it upon himself to change the smart lock. He brought his mother in to take over the master bedroom and then threw a dirty rag at me, ordering me to serve her. He thought I would cry and resign myself to it, but I didn't. I turned around in silence and signed the papers to sell the condo. The next morning, that husband of mine collapsed on the floor screaming, "I am Emily, and I've been a corporate accountant for over 7 years. The nature of my job has taught me to be meticulous, careful, and that the numbers must always be clear and precise. Perhaps that's why I also want everything in my life to be perfectly organized. Ever since I was single, I worked diligently, saving every penny of my salary for the future. My parents are retired public school teachers. They have been hardworking and frugal their entire lives. They loved me dearly as their only child and couldn't bear the thought of me renting and living in an unstable situation after getting married. So they withdrew all their retirement savings, along with the money from selling a piece of farmland in my grandmother's rural hometown to buy me a luxury condo in cash in the upscale Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. This condo is solely in my name, a separate premarital asset. My parents handed me the property deed, reminding me that this was a safety net for my future, a safe haven, so I would always have a place to return to. Upon receiving this massive gift soaked in my parents' blood, sweat, and tears, I promised myself I would value and take excellent care of it. At that time, Jake and I had recently gotten legally married at the courthouse and were preparing for our formal wedding reception. Jake is a corporate project manager, originally from a small remote town in West Virginia, and his family's financial situation isn't great. I fell in love with Jake because I thought he was a kind, ambitious person who always knew the right things to say. When he found out my parents had bought me a condo, Jake was thrilled. He promised me the moon and the stars, saying he would dedicate himself to working hard and taking care of me for the rest of my life, to repay my family's generosity. The condo was a gut rehab. Everything from the electrical wiring and plumbing to the drywall and flooring had to be done from scratch. I didn't want to burden my parents any further. So I decided to withdraw $50,000 of my personal savings to cover the interior design and construction costs. That was the money I had accumulated by working late into the night doing freelance bookkeeping for years. I selected every kitchen tile and every plank of custom oak flooring myself to avoid any waste of materials. I even installed a small hidden security camera in the living room. I meticulously picked out the window drapes and the dining room set with my own hands. I wanted my home to be perfect, a warm and lasting nest. For 3 long months, I commuted back and forth between my office and the condo every single day. I used my lunch breaks to drive across town in the glaring sun just to supervise the electricians and plumbers. After work, I would stop by again to watch the carpenters install the kitchen cabinets and to sweep up the piles of debris and sawdust scattered everywhere. My clothes were constantly covered in dust and I sweated buckets, but just thinking about the day I would move into that flawless home made all my exhaustion fade away. During that entire time, Jake rarely showed up. I had previously given him the smart lock passcode so he could drop by and check on things if needed. He used the excuse that year-end work was overwhelming, citing constant business trips and client meetings. Since I loved my husband, I assumed he was working hard for our shared future. So I never complained once. I told myself I would handle the condo so he could focus on his career, believing that harmony between us was the greatest blessing. Yesterday, late in the afternoon, the professional cleaning crew finally left, leaving me with a sparkling, immaculate condo. The delicate scent of new wood mixed with the warm yellow glow radiating from the recessed ceiling lights filled me with indescribable happiness. I carefully checked the door's keypad, stroked the soft leather sofa in the living room, and smiled with satisfaction. Our home was finally complete. I pulled out my phone, took a few pictures of my favorite corners, and sent them to Jake via text with a cheerful message. I told him the house was finished and spotless, and asked him to clear his schedule this weekend so we could move our things in and settle down, which would make planning the wedding reception next month much easier. The message showed as delivered, but there was no reply. I called his phone, but I only heard the automated voicemail greeting, saying the number was unavailable. I frowned slightly, a bit disappointed, but let it go. He was probably in a meeting or out to dinner with his boss, and his battery had died. I locked the door carefully, carrying that floating sense of joy back to my old rented apartment, eagerly awaiting the next morning to bring Jake over and surprise him. Little did I know that the door I had just closed was about to open to the biggest storm of my life. Early the next morning, a cold drizzle was falling over Chicago. I woke up at dawn anxious because Jake hadn't shown any signs of life all night. The text message remained delivered, but unread, and all my calls sank into a terrifying silence. My woman's intuition told me something was wrong. I quickly threw on a jacket, got my car out of the alley, and drove straight to the building. Standing in front of the door of my condo, Unit 12A, I took a deep breath to calm down. I placed my index finger on the smart lock's fingerprint sensor. A sharp beep sounded, accompanied by a flashing red LED light indicating an error. I was a bit puzzled. I quickly wiped my finger on my jacket sleeve, thinking the rain might have messed with the sensor. I tried a second time, a third time, but the lock coldly rejected me with dry beeps. Confusion began to cloud my mind. I switched to typing in the numeric passcode my birthday, which I had set myself just the day before. The keypad lit up. I carefully pressed each number, but the result was the same. A long, rejecting beep. The lock screen displayed a warning for too many incorrect attempts. My blood ran cold. A fingerprint sensor might glitch, but it's impossible for it to automatically erase a numeric passcode overnight. Suddenly I remembered, I always kept the mechanical spare key in my purse. I frantically dug through it until I found the key safely tucked in a zippered pocket. I took the long key and inserted it into the mechanical cylinder, ingeniously hidden beneath the door handle. But once again, cruel reality dealt me another blow. The key wouldn't go all the way in. The internal grooves of the cylinder had been completely changed. Someone had taken apart my front door lock and replaced it with a brand new cylinder overnight. I took a step back, staring blankly at the gleaming brass plate with the unit number. Yes, it was 12A. Yes, it was the familiar 12th floor hallway I had walked down until the soles of my shoes wore out over the last 3 months. Behind that fireproof oak veneered door was all my dedication, my money, and my hopes for a home. And now I found myself locked out, turned into a stranger, unable to enter the very house I owned. My worry for Jake's safety was instantly replaced by a much more terrifying anxiety. Why had the lock been changed? Who had the right and the ability to do so overnight? After I locked up and left, and the contractors handed over all the original access cards and passcodes, the building's HOA and management weren't allowed to interfere with a resident's private property, either. Without the owner's consent, there was only one other person besides me who knew the original passcode, Jake. I pulled out my phone and kept calling Jake, but I kept getting the same voicemail. Anger began to swell in my chest. If burglars had actually broken in, they would have forced the lock to steal. They wouldn't have gone through the trouble of calling a professional locksmith to change the cylinder and reset the entire fingerprint and passcode system. This was a deliberate act, carefully calculated and shamelessly executed. I gripped the door handle tightly and knocked 3 sharp times on the wooden surface. The sound echoed in the quiet hallway. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear any movement inside. The space was eerily silent. Just as I was about to turn around to go down to the lobby and ask the front desk to check the security cameras, a click sounded from inside the lock. The heavy steel deadbolt retracted. The door cracked open, and my heart skipped a beat. I stepped back, mentally preparing myself to face whatever might happen. But the scene that appeared before my eyes was something not even my wildest imagination could have anticipated. The door swung wide open, and the person standing inside was none other than Jake. He was still wearing his wrinkled pajamas, looking groggy, but the moment he saw me, his expression changed instantly. There was a flash of guilt, but it quickly morphed into a cold indifference. But what left me paralyzed wasn't Jake's appearance. It was the scene behind him. The living room, which yesterday was flawless and tidy, now looked like a messy storage unit. In the middle of the gleaming custom oak floors were 2 dirty garbage bags, a leaky styrofoam cooler tied with twine, dripping a murky liquid that reeked of cheap bologna and pungent aged cheese, and several old duffel bags tossed carelessly around. On top of the expensive imported leather sofa I had cared for so much, there were a couple of cheap jackets and a ratty straw hat. An older woman walked out of the kitchen. She was wearing a floral housecoat in dark colors. Her hair was pulled back into a bun at the nape of her neck, and in her hand, she held an old cleaning rag. It was Patty, Jake's mother, my future mother-in-law. As she walked, she looked around with a judgmental expression. Seeing me at the door, she showed no surprise, just dropped a cold remark. Patty said in a shrill voice, "You're finally here. If you're coming in, shut the door so the wind and dust don't get inside." I walked in, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible, and turned to look Jake squarely in the eyes, demanding an explanation. With a tense voice, I said, Jake, what is the meaning of this? Why was your phone off? Why is your mother here with all these things? And most importantly, why did you change the passcode and the lock on my house without telling me? Jake rubbed the back of his neck, walked over and patted me on the shoulder with a condescending attitude. His voice sounded smooth as if he had rehearsed it beforehand. Jake said, "Well, the place is done. We were going to move in sooner or later. I called a locksmith yesterday to change the lock for security reasons, and while I was at it, I drove down and brought my mom up from West Virginia so she can live with us permanently. She's getting older and feels lonely out in the country. As her eldest son, it's my responsibility to take care of her. I was afraid you'd worry and object to her coming. So, I took the initiative to just get it done. I have the new key. From now on, I am the head of this household. You can go to work with peace of mind. Mom will handle the household chores." I listened to the words coming out of Jake's mouth and felt like I was standing in the middle of a freezing blizzard. The absolute audacity. He talked about bringing his mother to live here permanently, changing the locks and stripping me of my authority with such a casual attitude, as if he were the one who had bought and renovated the condo. Patty walked over and tossed the dirty cleaning rag right onto the imported marble coffee table I had shipped from overseas. She made a face of disgust. Patty said loudly, "Good Lord, what kind of design is this? It's as cold as a funeral home. The walls are stark white, the lights are dim, and this furniture, this sofa is so squishy, you sink right into it. It's bad for your back and bones. Jake, call someone this afternoon to haul this sofa away and make some room. Buy a wooden bench, or put a recliner there for me. It's much easier to clean." I looked at the $3,000 leather sofa she despised and wanted to throw out, feeling a knot in my chest. Patty didn't stop there. She pointed directly at the master bedroom. Patty continued, "That big room, the one with the huge window facing the street, I already moved my stuff in there. It's bright, well-ventilated, perfect for an older person. You two are young. You can squeeze into the small guest room next door. Don't go competing with your elders." My patience had run dry. That master bedroom was where I had custom-ordered a solid mahogany king-sized bed and designed a walk-in closet and a vanity for the two of us. Patty had just arrived and already claimed it for herself, treating me like a voiceless tenant. This blatant invasion wasn't an accident. It was a calculated plan by mother and son to seize control of the house from day one. I stood planted in the middle of the living room, looking around the home I had built with so much sweat and tears. The dirt from their shoes left black scuff marks on the light oak floors. The smell of the cheap meats from Patty's cooler mixed with the scent of new wood, creating a suffocating, nauseating atmosphere. Blood rushed to my head, but the rational mind of an accountant stopped me from breaking into uncontrolled screaming. I turned to Jake with a piercing glare. I enunciated every word clearly. "Jake, let me remind you that this condo was bought for me by my parents before we even got married. The deed is solely in my name. Every single penny for the renovation and the furniture came out of my savings. You didn't contribute a single dime. So, what gives you the right to change the lock? You lock me out of my own house and commandeer my belongings so your mother can take over the master bedroom. Do you not realize that your behavior is wildly out of line and completely disrespectful to me?" Hearing me bring up money and ownership, Jake's face flushed with wounded pride. He waved his hand and raised his voice, trying to deflect with empty moral grandstanding. Jake yelled, "Stop talking about money. When a couple gets married, what's the husband's is the wife's. What is this nonsense about separate or joint property? Are you going to nickel and dime your own husband and mother-in-law? My mother worked her fingers to the bone raising me for decades. Now that I have a decent house, bringing her here to take care of her is my moral obligation. A son's duty comes first. As a daughter-in-law, you need to be reasonable and obedient. Don't come in here acting like some spoiled rich girl. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. From now on, the rules in this house are set by my mother." Patty, standing next to him, seized the opportunity to pile on. She marched over to a corner of the balcony and picked up a ragged cloth. It was a rag the drywallers had used the day before to wipe up spackle completely stiff and covered in dry white plaster dust. I hadn't had time to throw it away yet. Patty handed it to Jake, giving him a knowing wink. Jake took the filthy rag and without hesitation threw it directly onto the floor right at the tips of my shoes. A cloud of plaster dust puffed up. He lifted his chin and ordered me with the tone of a superior. Jake pointed at the floor. "How can you leave the house this dirty?" "My mother is elderly. Her lungs are weak. She can't handle the dust. Change your clothes, take this rag, scrub the whole house, and organize that pile of stuff out there for my mom. Right now. As a daughter-in-law, you have to roll up your sleeves and pull your weight. Are you just going to stand there arguing? I looked at the cement-covered rag sitting at my feet, then at Jake's arrogant expression, and finally at Patty's smug smile. I felt everything inside me shatter. The love, the respect, the faith in a happy marriage, all of it shattered like crushed glass. This house, which was supposed to be a home, had become a tool to trample on my dignity. They didn't see me as a wife. They didn't see me as family. They only saw me as a gullible ATM, an unpaid maid to serve their selfishness and greed. A man who uses morality to justify his entitlement. A mother-in-law who uses her seniority to oppress her daughter-in-law from the very second she steps foot in the door. If I caved today, the rest of my life would be a chain of humiliations, living as a slave in the house I had built with my own blood and tears. I didn't shed a single tear. The pain had transformed into a terrifying calmness. No arguing, no crying, no explaining. I slowly bent down and picked up the dirty rag. Seeing this, Jake smiled smugly, thinking he had broken me into submission. But he was dead wrong. I walked over to the luxurious marble coffee table and gently placed the rag on top of it. I raised my head and looked Jake dead in the face for the last time. Without saying a word, I turned around and walked out the door with firm, decisive steps. I heard Jake calling after me, but I completely ignored him. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button. The elevator doors closed, severing my world from those greedy, scheming parasites. My mind became exceptionally clear. A cold, ruthless, and precise plan began to form in the thoughts of the senior accountant. As soon as I walked out of the building's lobby, I felt the freezing wind hit my face, but my heart was burning with the fire of determination. I went straight to the coffee shop next door. I picked the most secluded corner and pulled out my phone. The first number I dialed was Sarah's. Sarah has been my best friend since college. Unlike my calm exterior, Sarah is a shrewd, decisive woman with a killer instinct for business. She currently owns a highly reputable high-end real estate brokerage in Chicago. Sarah knows the law, understands the market, and above all, never tolerates injustice. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Sarah said in her usual booming voice, "Girl, why are you calling so early? Aren't you supposed to be playing blushing bride? Calling to make me go wedding dress shopping, or what?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and cut straight to the chase. I said, "Sarah, where are you? I need your help immediately." "It's about the condo in Lincoln Park." Hearing the dead seriousness in my voice, Sarah immediately dropped the banter. Sarah replied, "I'm at the office." "What's wrong, Emily? You sound like you've seen a ghost." "Tell me everything right now." I took a deep breath and gave her a detailed rundown of everything that had happened over the last half hour. From Jake changing the locks on his own and bringing Patty to hijack the master bedroom, to the act of throwing the plaster rag at my feet to humiliate me in the middle of the living room. I recounted it with such clarity and detail that even I was surprised by my ability to compartmentalize my emotions. On the other end of the line, Sarah listened in silence, but I could hear her heavy breathing and the sound of her tapping her pen furiously against her desk. Sarah hissed through the phone, "What a miserable piece of trash. A disgusting freeloader robbing you blind in broad daylight. Mother and son ganging up to bully you. Emily, are you crying? Don't you dare cry. How do you want me to handle this? Say the word and I'll send my guys over to throw them out on the street right now." I stared out at the busy street traffic with a steely gaze. I said clearly, "Sarah, I'm not going to cause a scene or argue with those people. They aren't worth it. I want to sell the condo right now. The market value for that unit is around $900,000. You know the market. I'll sell it to you for $750,000. I'm writing off the $150K loss as the cost of the interior finishes I just did. The only condition is, you have to get the cash together and wire it to me this afternoon. We sign the deed at your real estate attorney's office and transfer ownership immediately. And tomorrow morning you bring your people to take possession of the unit and evict them as the legal owner. Can you do it?" There was about 3 seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Then Sarah let out a laugh full of dark amusement and pure admiration. Sarah said loudly, "Emily, you really are my best friend. Cold, calculated, and leaving no loose ends. I can absolutely pull together the $750,000 cash. My legal team is on standby. Stay put in that coffee shop. Send me your PIN. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Have your original deed, your ID, and your paperwork ready. I'll handle this. I'm going to show them what it costs to mess with a friend of Sarah's. Hanging up, I took a sip of black coffee, no sugar. The bitter taste slid down my throat, awakening all my senses. That's life. There are things you think belong to you forever, but it only takes one night to see people's true colors. That condo was a dream of home, but now it had been tainted by calculation and greed. Keeping it would only bring me more disgust and pain. The best way to punish those who try to usurp someone else's property is to legally rip all hope away from them. I opened my purse to check all my personal documents, and the original deed which I happened to have with me since I used it yesterday to apply for a new credit line. Everything was in order. A marriage certificate with ink still fresh couldn't chain me to a toxic family. I would teach Jake and Patty that no one can steal someone else's property through deceit, and that karma spares no one. Exactly 15 minutes later, Sarah's SUV pulled up aggressively in front of the coffee shop. Sarah stepped out tall, wearing a razor-sharp power suit carrying a thick leather folder. She walked in quickly, gave me a hard squeeze on the shoulder as a silent show of support, and then sat down, her sharp eyes burning with the fire of a general ready for war. The turning point of my life officially began at this exact moment. Sarah's car glided smoothly through the bustling streets of Chicago, taking us straight to a high-end real estate attorney's office on LaSalle Street. Sitting in the passenger seat, I clutched the purse containing my ID and the deed to my name. The feeling in that moment was surreal. Just yesterday, I was cherishing the thought of a home filled with laughter and warm family dinners, and now I was rushing to sell off that unfinished dream. Sarah, driving, glanced over at me occasionally with concern. She reached over and gave the back of my hand a gentle pat, her deep, reassuring voice cutting through the silence. Sarah said firmly, "Don't regret this. To cut out a tumor, you have to accept a moment of pain. If you keep that condo, they'll latch onto you like leeches. I've been in real estate for years and seen countless property disputes. If you're soft and tolerant, they'll exploit it and take everything from you. I'm buying this condo as a short-term flip. You get your capital back to return to your parents." I nodded. What Sarah was saying was the absolute truth in the cruel reality I was facing. My parents back home had saved every penny of their pensions, depriving themselves of luxuries to buy their daughter a home. I couldn't let my parents' blood, sweat, and tears turn into free housing for heartless grifters. At the attorney's office, the paperwork was processed with incredible speed. Sarah was a VIP client there, so our case was handled immediately. The attorney verified my driver's license, my marriage certificate, and the original deed. Because the deed to the condo was recorded before Jake and I officially signed our marriage license at the courthouse, it was entirely my separate property under the law. I had full legal right to dispose of it without needing my husband's signature. I took the pen and signed the warranty deed and closing documents. The transaction price was clearly stated as $750,000. As I signed and initialed every page, I felt a massive wave of relief. An invisible crushing weight had just been lifted. The moment I signed the last page, my phone buzzed. A notification popped up from my banking app. Sarah's title company had wired the $750,000 directly into my personal account in a single transaction. The deal was done legally, transparently, and binding under the law. By the time we walked out of the attorney's office, it was late afternoon. Sarah pulled out her phone and called her property management department. She ordered 5 large, uniformed security guards to be present at the lobby of the condo building at exactly 6:00 a.m. the next day. She also didn't forget to tell them to bring heavy-duty trash bags and cardboard boxes. With everything arranged, Sarah turned to me and told me to book a nearby hotel to rest, and to absolutely not answer my phone or open the door for anyone. I took an Uber to a nice hotel on the Magnificent Mile and booked a quiet room on a high floor. As soon as I got into the room, I turned off my cell phone. I needed complete silence to steady my nerves. After such a massive shock, I lay on the crisp white hotel sheets, staring blankly at the ceiling. I remembered Jake's sweet promises the day he proposed. He said he would spend his life protecting me, that he would make me the happiest woman in the world. Those empty words had now morphed into sharp knives, shredding my self-esteem. But I didn't cry. Tears don't solve human cruelty. I closed my eyes, resting up for the self-made hurricane I was about to unleash the next morning. At 6:00 a.m. sharp the next morning, my alarm woke me up. I turned my phone back on, and instantly the screen flooded with dozens of missed calls from Jake and Patty. Last night, when I didn't come home to pack my clothes, he must have started calling to intimidate me. I smiled faintly. I ignored all of it and opened FaceTime to call Sarah. On the other end, Sarah was already dressed to kill, holding a stack of documents, the recorded deed, and the closing paperwork in her hand. Sarah waved at me through the screen. Behind her, 5 massive guys in blue security uniforms and tactical caps were lined up in front of Unit 12A. Sarah spoke loudly into the microphone. "Get ready for a show. I'm about to knock this door down." Saying that, Sarah signaled the lead guard to step up. The young man raised a heavy fist and pounded repeatedly on the solid fireproof door. The thunderous sound echoed down the quiet hallway. After about 3 minutes of relentless pounding, a click was heard from inside. The door cracked open and Patty's face appeared, looking extremely annoyed and groggy. She was wearing a plum-colored silk nightgown, her hair a mess, her eyes shooting daggers. Patty yelled, "Who the hell is making all this racket? It's barely dawn and you're banging on the door like a debt collector. You're waking up the elderly. Where is Emily? Tell her to get out here and see who is causing this mess." Sarah pushed the door hard, making Patty stumble backward. My best friend marched majestically into the living room, followed by the imposing security team. Patty backed up in terror, clutching her chest and stammering, demanding to know who they were and if they were robbing the place in broad daylight. Sarah didn't bother arguing. She pulled the copy of the recorded deed and the purchase agreement from her folder and held it right up to the mother-in-law's face. Sarah declared with a booming voice, "Take a good look at this. I am Sarah, the owner of a real estate brokerage and the new legal owner of this condo. Emily sold this property to me yesterday afternoon. Currently, you and your son are illegally trespassing on my private property. I'm giving you exactly 5 minutes to wake your son up, pack up your trash, and get the hell out of my house. Otherwise, my guys will do it for you." Patty stared wide-eyed at the crisp legal documents. Even if she didn't understand legalese, she perfectly understood the terrifying power of a document with an official state seal. However, her stubborn nature wouldn't let her surrender that easily. She threw her arms up in the middle of the living room and started making a massive scene, screaming and wailing, hoping the neighbors would come out and intervene. Patty shrieked, "Oh my God, thieves, this is my son's house. It belongs to my Jake. How dare his wife sell it behind his back? Get out of here right now or I'm calling the cops to have you all arrested." Sarah burst into a loud, roaring laugh, shooting Patty a look as sharp as a scalpel. She made a gesture to her security team to move in. Immediately, the 5 guards went to work with total professionalism. One grabbed the 2 garbage bags, another grabbed the styrofoam cooler of pungent meat, and hauled them out the front door. The duffel bags of cheap clothes, the straw hat, and even the dirty plastic sandals were tossed out into the hallway. Patty ran around frantically trying to grab her stuff, but she was completely powerless against the sheer size of the men. In an instant, the living room was cleared of all the junk the mother and son had brought in the day before. The commotion woke Jake up. He stumbled out of the small guest bedroom. His eyes were barely open, rubbing them constantly, and he asked in a groggy, irritated voice what the hell all the noise was about. But when he opened his eyes and saw 5 strange men filling the living room and his mother sitting on the floor wailing, he woke up entirely. Jake stood frozen in the middle of the room, looking around the condo. The luggage they had brought from West Virginia had vanished without a trace. The room was empty and cold. He turned to Sarah, the woman in the power suit, standing there with her arms crossed and a smirk on her face. Jake recognized Sarah because he had seen her several times at dinners with my friend group. Jake stammered, "Sarah, why did you bring people into my house to cause a scene? Where is my wife? Where is Emily? Where did you put my mother's things?" Sarah stepped forward and slammed the folder with the copy of the deed and the sale contract onto the kitchen island. She lifted her chin and spoke with a razor-sharp tone showing zero mercy. "Jake, open your eyes and read carefully. Emily sold me this condo. Money-wired deal closed, legally recorded. You and your mother have absolutely zero rights or equity in this house. Please gather the rest of your personal belongings and walk out that door immediately. Clear the space so my contracting team can come in and start tearing down walls." Hearing the word sold, Jake's legs seemed to lose all their strength. He collapsed onto the custom oak floor. His knees hit the wood hard, making a loud thud. Jake's face went as pale as a sheet of paper. He grabbed his head, staring blankly into space in total despair. Unable to accept it, Jake lunged at the folder on the counter, flipping through the pages, examining the notary seal and my fresh signature at the bottom. How? How could she do this? Where is my house? I just changed the locks yesterday. I told my mom to move in here to retire. Emily, you conned me. Sarah walked over, leaned down, and looked directly into the pathetic face of the greedy man. Her words were like sledgehammers smashing the facade of fake morality Jake had built for so long. Sarah mocked. Your house. Did you put a single penny into this place to dare call it yours? The money to buy this came from the blood, sweat, and tears of Emily's parents. The money for the renovations came from Emily working night and day. You changed the locks behind her back. You hijacked the master bedroom. You tried to force your wife to be your mother's maid in her own home. A despicable freeloader like you. What right do you have to demand anything here? You dump your duty as a son onto your wife, while taking all the credit for being a good boy. Where I'm from, scam artists like you get their teeth kicked in. Patty stumbled up from the hallway, grabbed onto her son's pajama pants, and sobbed uncontrollably. She kept cursing me, calling me an ungrateful daughter-in-law, a scammer who stole her husband's property. Sarah didn't let the mother-son duo continue their theatrical performance for another second. She signaled the guards. 2 of them grabbed Jake under the armpits, and the other 3 pulled Patty by the arms. They dragged both of them out into the hallway, dumping them next to the trash bags and the reeking styrofoam cooler. The heavy oak door slammed shut in their faces. The loud clack of the deadbolt marked the end of the greedy man's dream of a free ride. I watched the entire event unfold through my phone screen in my hotel room. Feeling a mix of immense satisfaction and a slight bit of bitterness, I turned off the phone, went into the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face to regain my composure. I knew this war wasn't over yet. People with deeply selfish natures never admit their mistakes. They will look for any way to attack the person who exposed their true face. Just as I predicted, only 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing nonstop with a barrage of notifications from the family group chat. The iMessage group called Miller Family was blowing up. This group had over 50 members from Jake's grandparents, uncles, and aunts down to distant cousins back in West Virginia. Usually, the group was only used to send mundane holiday greetings or organize potlucks, but today it was unusually chaotic. I opened the phone to look, and the first thing I saw was a massive block of text sent by Jake. The words were a tear-jerking, tragic masterpiece. Like a modern-day soap opera, Jake wrote that he was an exemplary husband who always loved and spoiled his wife. He listed his supposed contributions to building our home, from sourcing the contractors to personally overseeing the construction. However, the wife he trusted completely was an adulterous, cruel, and heartless woman. Jake falsely accused me of having an affair and conspiring with my lover to secretly sell the marital home and run away with the money. The absolute peak of his fiction was when he described how I had hired armed thugs to raid the house at dawn, physically assault, and throw his beloved mother Patty out into the freezing hallway, leaving her crying hysterically, clutching her luggage. Accompanying the post was a photo of Patty sitting on the floor, her face buried in her hands, crying next to a cracked styrofoam cooler, spilling foul-smelling liquid. Instantly, Jake's message ignited the outrage of a family that already had a heavily patriarchal mindset and blindly defended their own. An avalanche of insults and curses flooded my screen. Uncle Tony, the patriarch of the family, typed in all caps, "What a disgrace to our family bringing this tramp in as a daughter-in-law. A woman who scams and sells her husband's house deserves to be thrown in jail. Jake, sue her immediately. Force her to return the money to our family." Aunt Carol, who constantly asked me to loan her money and never paid it back, rushed to join the lynch mob. She wrote sarcastically, "I knew it the second I saw her. With those cold eyes and dark lipstick. She's a snake. Poor Patty. Raises her son only to have the daughter-in-law hire goons to beat her and throw her out. Women like that will burn in hell." Uncle Mike, an alcoholic who regularly abused his own wife and kids back in their town, also felt bold enough to preach. Women these days have no morals. When you get married, you obey your husband. The assets in the husband's house belong to the husband's family. If she dares to sell it on her own, the cops should lock her up. Jake, come back home, and your uncle will find you a proper, obedient wife. There are plenty of good country girls. You don't need to cling to that traitor. I read every single message with growing disgust. These were the exact same people who on my wedding day had fawned over me and showered me with praise when they found out I owned real estate in the city and had a stable corporate job. The hypocrisy of the entire group made me physically sick. They didn't care about the truth. They didn't want explanations. They relied on a poorly constructed lie from Jake to tear down someone else's character. Jake's ability to play the victim had reached a masterclass level, turning a thief into a pitiful husband betrayed by his wife. If I were a weak woman, I probably would have crumbled under this horrific social pressure. But I am an accountant. I work with hard data invoices and undeniable proof, not empty whining. I decided it was time to put out this fire of lies with the absolute coldest water possible. I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed, booted up my laptop, and tethered it to my phone. I created a new folder on my desktop with a very concise name, The Truth. Inside this folder, I began arranging the evidence I had prepared beforehand, in a strict logical sequence, to dismantle every single slander Jake and his mother had spun. The first piece of evidence was a high-resolution scan of the first and second pages of the deed. The bold print clearly showed my name as the sole legal owner. Specifically, I used a software tool to circle the date the deed was recorded in bright red. The date was exactly 3 months before Jake and I officially signed our marriage certificate at the courthouse. This photo was the first direct kill shot, proving it was separate premarital property. Jake had absolutely zero legal right to claim a dime of it, or call it his house. The second piece of evidence was a 3-month bank statement from my personal checking account, complete with the bank's official letterhead. I highlighted the wire transfers paying for the building materials, the contractors, the painters, and the purchase of the furniture and appliances. Every single amount from the $5,000 deposits to the few $100s for fixtures totaled exactly $50,000. And all of it came exclusively from my personal account. There wasn't a single cent under the name Jake Miller. This completely shredded the lie that he had contributed to building our home. But the third piece of evidence was the nuclear option. During the renovation to prevent contractor theft, I had secretly installed a hidden camera disguised as a light bulb in the recessed ceiling of the living room. This camera recorded crystal clear audio and 1080p video. I pulled the exact clip from the previous afternoon. The video clearly showed Jake using his new key to open the door and let Patty in. The footage of Patty trashing my expensive furniture and tossing the cleaning rag onto the table was captured without missing a single frame. And the scene that broke my heart the most, Jake picking up the plaster-covered rag, throwing it violently at my feet, and aggressively ordering me to clean the house and serve his mother. The audio was booming, exposing the arrogant, abusive, and insanely greedy nature of the mother and son. I compressed these 3 files into a single format. I added a brief but razor-sharp message: "Dear Miller family, aunts and uncles, please view the documents, listen to the audio, and judge for yourselves who the real scammer and thief is. I sold my own property completely legally. As for your nephew, tell him to expect a court summons for divorce. With your permission, I am leaving this group." I hit the send button and watched the progress bar hit 100%. Then I immediately tapped the button to leave the iMessage group chat. I didn't need to wait around to see their reaction. I could vividly imagine the scene. The exact same people who were just cursing my name were now sitting with their mouths hanging open, staring in absolute shock at the irrefutable proof on their screens. The loud, chaotic chat suddenly went dead silent. A group of over 50 people went completely mute. Not a single person dared to send another message defending him. The hard evidence had brutally exposed the despicable truth about Jake ripping off the mask of the innocent victim he had glued to his face. The silence of the mob of relatives was in that moment the most humiliating sentence for people who were used to lying, leeching off others, and stepping on people for their own gain. The storm in the virtual world had been silenced, but the hurricane in the real-world public opinion and Jake's career was just beginning. Sarah was not going to let this slide. The silence of Jake's family group was just the calm before a massive Category 5 hurricane. Sarah, my fiercely loyal friend, is never one to sit back when her friend is attacked. Working in high-end real estate, Sarah perfectly understands the devastating power of social media and public relations. That same afternoon, while I was organizing my things in the hotel room, Sarah called me, sounding triumphant. She told me to open Facebook and check out the priceless gift she had just given Jake and his mother. I followed her advice. I opened the app, and the first thing on my feed was a post being shared at breakneck speed across all the major Chicago neighborhood groups. The title was written in blazing red caps: "Husband changes locks to hijack wife's condo for his mom. Wife sells condo for cash in 2 hours to evict them." The post didn't mention our full real names or the exact address of the building, but the narrative was detailed down to the last punctuation mark. From the story of the wife who dropped $50K of her own cash to furnish the place, to the husband secretly changing the locks, the mother-in-law commandeering the master suite, and the horrific act of throwing cement-covered rag at the wife's feet. All the ironclad evidence I had dropped in the family chat that morning, the premarital deed, the bank statements, and especially the crisp security camera footage, were masterfully embedded into the post by Sarah. The faces in the video were blurred, but Jake's build, his striped button-down shirt, and the voices of him and Patty were unmistakable to anyone who knew them. The power of the internet is terrifying. In just a few hours, the post had racked up tens of thousands of likes, comments, and shares. Public opinion was completely outraged by the shameless behavior of the greedy man. I scrolled through the comments. Women, mothers, and people from all walks of life condemned the husband's patriarchal freeloading entitlement. One top comment said that men who weaponize filial piety to steal from their wives are the absolute scum of the earth. Others celebrated the wife's brilliant, ruthless execution. Without shedding a tear, without screaming, she liquidated the asset in the blink of an eye and threw the parasites to the curb. The cautionary tale for gold-digging men became the hottest topic on local feeds. But the worst part for Jake wasn't getting roasted by strangers online. It's a small world. Even though Sarah blurred the faces, Jake's distinct striped shirt and voice were quickly recognized by people in his social circle. Jake worked for a mid-sized commercial construction management firm in the Loop. A few of his coworkers were already in those Chicago neighborhood Facebook groups. Soon enough, the link was circulating through every department via Slack and email. Sarah texted me, saying a friend of hers who worked in the same office building as Jake had just given her a bombshell update. That afternoon, when Jake walked into the office after a disastrous morning of being evicted, he was immediately met with bizarre side-eye glances from everyone. The female coworkers who usually joked with him now turned their backs in disgust. The men whispered and pointed as he walked by. Even when Jake walked into the break room, the 3 or 4 people making coffee scattered instantly. No one wanted to breathe the same air as a guy famous for trying to steal his wife's house. Jake, who had always been a deeply vain man who loved to brag about his success and his perfect family, suddenly became the laughingstock of the entire firm. The image of the successful self-made man and devoted son he had carefully curated for years completely evaporated. The social ostracization from his peers was a severe psychological punishment, a direct hit to the fragile ego of a man accustomed to living behind a fake facade. The court of public opinion had done its job cornering the cheating husband. Around 8:00 p.m., while I was enjoying a cup of hot chamomile tea in my room, the hotel phone rang. The front desk concierge informed me that a man claiming to be my husband was causing a scene in the lobby demanding to see me. He asked if I needed him to call security to have him removed. I replied calmly to let him wait. I would be right down. I knew Jake's personality flawlessly. Once backed into a corner and stripped of his dignity, he would grasp at any life preserver, even if it was the person he had humiliated just yesterday. I changed into a sharp outfit, fixed my hair, and took the elevator down to the ground floor. As soon as the elevator doors parted, I saw Jake. He looked completely different from his usual polished, confident self. Now he just looked pathetic. His clothes were rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot from panic and lack of sleep. The second he saw me, it was like a drowning man spotting a raft. He ran toward me, trying to grab my hands. I took a cold step back. I crossed my arms and stared at him with eyes like daggers. Jake didn't hesitate for a second. He dropped his arms and fell straight to his knees on the cold marble floor of the hotel lobby. A few passing guests stopped to stare in curiosity, but Jake had entirely abandoned his pride. He launched into his pathetic theatrical crying. Jake sobbed and begged Emily, "I'm so sorry I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please forgive me. Please take that post off the internet. My coworkers are destroying me." My boss already found out. "I've lost my entire reputation, Emily." I looked down at him, his face bathed in tears. I didn't feel an ounce of pity, only absolute contempt. A grown, educated man choosing to kneel and cry in public just to evade the consequences of his own actions. I said in a flat, monotone voice, "Get up. Crying on the floor doesn't fix anything. Yesterday, when you threw that rag in my face when your mother insulted me, you looked real tough, didn't you? Why are you such a coward now?" Hearing me mention Patty, Jake seemed to find an out. He immediately started denying his guilt, throwing the mother who birthed him completely under the bus. Jake frantically explained, "Emily, you have to believe me. I didn't want any of this to happen. It was all my mom's fault. She's getting senile. She's the one who pressured me to change the locks. She forced me to move her in, saying it was to discipline the new wife. I'm her son. I couldn't say no. But in my heart, I always loved you. You are my wife. If you love me, please talk to Sarah. Try to buy the condo back. We'll move in, and I swear to God I'll put my mom on a bus back to West Virginia tomorrow morning. I won't let you suffer ever again." Jake's excuses made me want to vomit. The filial duty he used to lecture me just 24 hours ago, now faced with losing his career and his assets, he tossed his own mother away without a second thought. A man this ungrateful and treacherous didn't deserve a shred of my sympathy. This cheap performance was so pathetic I didn't want to waste another second watching it. I took a step back, maintaining a safe distance from the filth kneeling on the floor. Looking at Jake's cowardly face, I couldn't hold back the disgust churning in my stomach. On the lobby, coffee table was a glass of ice water a waiter had just set down. I grabbed it and threw the freezing water directly into his face. The shock of the ice water snapped his sobs in half. He jerked his head up and looked at me in shock, the water dripping down his cheeks mixing with his fake tears. I said through gritted teeth, enunciating every syllable. "Wake up. Your little show is over. Do you honestly think I don't know what you're plotting? You aren't kneeling here because you feel guilty or because you love me. You're kneeling here because of that project director promotion for the luxury resort in Aspen that you're so desperate for, aren't you?" Hearing me mention the Aspen project, the blood completely drained from Jake's face. His eyes went wide, his jaw dropped, unable to form a single word. He was struck entirely mute, terrified that I knew his ultimate weak spot. I smiled faintly and proceeded to rip the skin off this vile man's lies. 2 weeks ago, while I was cleaning our apartment, I accidentally overheard your phone call with Mr. Davis, your senior director. Mr. Davis is obsessed with architecture and interior design, and he only promotes executives who have refined taste and a solid, stable family life. On that call, you shamelessly bragged that you had just personally designed and renovated a luxury condo. You claimed it was the fruit of your own hard labor, proof of your project management skills and creativity. You even invited Mr. Davis over to tour your home to kiss up to him, hoping he'd hand you the multi-million-dollar Aspen resort contract. I stared dead into Jake's shifting, panicked eyes and exposed his filthy ambition. I told him straight to his face, "You used my blood, sweat, and money to build a house and then took the credit to impress the corporate world. You planned to steal my condo just to use it as a stepping stone for your career. Now that the condo is gone, what exactly are you going to show off to Director Davis? If your boss finds out his potential director is a fraud, a freeloader living off his wife and a hypocrite, do you think he'll trust you with that massive project? You only need me to get the condo back to keep your fake successful image from collapsing. Don't give me that garbage about a husband's love." My words, sharp as a scalpel, sliced through the final layer of Jake's armor. He lowered his head, stripped of any arguments to defend himself. His greed, vanity, and boundless ambition had turned him into a cruel monster toward his own wife. Jake didn't kneel out of repentance. He knelt because he was terrified of losing the perfect prop for his corporate image. Once a person's true nature is exposed, not even all the tears in the world can wash it clean. I knew that to kill a snake, you have to crush its head. If I let him go back to the office and spin a new lie, he might manage to fool his boss with another sob story. I had to rip his career built on a foundation of lies out by the roots. Seeing Jake slumped on the floor completely defeated, I decided to switch tactics. The sweetest revenge isn't flat-out rejection. It's giving your enemy a glimmer of hope, only to shatter it at the finish line. I took a deep breath, masked my cold expression, and forced a softer, almost conciliatory tone. I sighed lightly and took half a step forward. "All right, get up. People are staring. Making a scene will just embarrass us both. I'm a woman. I just want a peaceful family. If you truly regret this and want to change, I might reconsider." Hearing my apparent concession, Jake's eyes lit up like high beams in the dark. He scrambled up clumsily, dusting off his knees. His expression shifted from total despair to overwhelming joy. He actually believed his crying and begging had successfully manipulated his obedient wife yet again. Jake rushed forward. "Really, Emily, are you serious? You'll call Sarah to buy it back? I knew you still loved me. You are the most generous woman in the world. I promise you, from now on, I will listen to everything you say. I'll give you every paycheck I make." I nodded slightly, spinning a highly plausible lie to set the ultimate trap. I said clearly I just signed the deed and the contract yesterday. Sarah is my best friend. If I beg her to cancel the deal and pay a penalty fee, she'll probably agree out of friendship. But reversing the legal paperwork will take a few days. Right now, the most important thing is your job. Tomorrow afternoon, your boss, Mr. Davis, is coming to tour the condo, right? Jake nodded enthusiastically with a look of absolute confidence. He confirmed that Director Davis had accepted his invitation to view the condo at 3:00 p.m. the following day. It was his golden opportunity to showcase his aesthetic taste and win his boss's favor before the final decision on the Aspen promotion was made. I continued with a firm, supportive tone. "Tomorrow afternoon, I'll talk to Sarah and borrow the keys to the condo for a few hours. I'll go over there, clean everything up, and play the role of the supportive wife to welcome Mr. Davis with you." You just focus on proving your worth to your boss. Once you lock in that promotion, we'll talk about officially getting the condo back." With just a few words targeting his greed and ego, Jake swallowed the hook entirely. He didn't suspect my sudden change in attitude for a second. His sheer arrogance made him believe he was smart enough to easily flip the situation back in his favor. Jake thanked me profusely. He made endless empty promises and walked out of the hotel lobby radiating joy. Watching his back disappear through the sliding glass doors, I smelled a freezing cold smile. You reap what you sow. The plan to use his own weapon against him was already in motion. The stage for tomorrow was set. The lead actor was about to walk into a tragedy he could never have seen coming. Chicago, late afternoon, nearing the end of the year. The sun was shining with a pale golden hue. At 2:45 p.m., I was sitting in the passenger seat of Sarah's SUV, parked directly across the street from the building, watching everything through tinted windows. Earlier today, Sarah had informed me that her demo crew had already started working. They were currently smashing down the wall between the living room and the small guest bedroom to open up the floor plan to the new owner's liking. The brutal sound of hammer drills and sledgehammers echoed all the way down to the street. At 2:55 p.m., a sleek black Mercedes slowly pulled into the building's valet zone. The door opened, and Jake stepped out first. Today he was dressed to the nines, a sharp, perfectly tailored navy blue suit, hair slicked back, looking every bit the confident, highly successful project executive. Jake leaned down and respectfully opened the rear door for Director Davis. Mr. Davis was a man in his 50s, solidly built, dressed simply but radiating the intimidating aura of a corporate heavyweight. He nodded calmly in response to Jake's excessive fawning. Jake walked alongside Mr. Davis with his black leather briefcase, talking non-stop. Even from across the street, I could guess what he was bragging about. He was surely explaining the unique design concept of the space, how he had personally sourced every custom tile and decorative light fixture. Director Davis walked and listened, smiling occasionally in approval of his young executive's supposed passion. The two men entered the lobby, called the elevator, and headed up to the 12th floor. I pictured Jake brimming with confidence, anxiously waiting for the moment the condo door opened. In his mind, behind that door would be a pristine, luxurious space, a tray of fresh charcuterie prepared, and me, the perfectly obedient wife in an elegant dress, smiling and welcoming the VIP guest. He was absolutely certain that this performance of domestic perfection would score him perfect marks with his perfectionist boss. The elevator pinged at the 12th floor. Jake led the way, walking with a proud strut. But the quiet hallway was suddenly filled with the deafening, screeching noise of sledgehammers and concrete drills roaring out of Unit 12A. Jake frowned slightly a bit, taken aback, but quickly flashed a reassuring smile at Mr. Davis. He stepped up to the oak-veneered door and rang the doorbell with total confidence. The chime was completely drowned out by the roar of a rotary hammer. Jake turned to Mr. Davis and said proudly, "My wife must be in there doing some deep cleaning, which is why there's a little noise. The unit has incredible soundproofing, though. Once we step inside, it'll be dead quiet. My wife is an amazing cook and a wonderful host. Please make yourself at home." The heavy wooden door cracked open. Jake already had his most radiant, winning smile plastered on his face, ready to step into his kingdom. But that smile instantly froze. The muscles in his face twitched violently. The person standing behind the door wasn't me, dressed as the perfect corporate wife. And the interior wasn't a flawless luxury home. A waking nightmare crashed down on the lying man, delivering the absolute most deserved punishment for his sins. The curtain fell amidst the most stunning shock imaginable. The heavy oak door slowly swung wide open. The hallway light poured inside, revealing a scene of utter chaos. The deafening roar of a hammer drill ripped through the air, and thick white drywall dust floated everywhere, creating a foggy haze. The person standing behind the door wasn't me. It was Sarah. My best friend was wearing blue coveralls, a yellow hard hat, and a respirator mask covering half her face. Sarah stood with her arms crossed, her razor-sharp eyes locked onto the two men frozen in the doorway. Jake's smile completely shattered. He blinked rapidly, desperately trying to peer through the cloud of white dust to see clearly. Behind Sarah, 3 burly demo workers were smashing sledgehammers into the wall separating the living room and the guest bedroom. Chunks of drywall and studs crashed to the floor with loud, crunching thuds. The luxurious, cozy home Jake had just spent 20 minutes bragging to his boss about had been reduced to an active demolition zone. Jake, stammering and completely losing his mind, screamed over the noise of the drills. He demanded to know what the hell Sarah was doing and why she was destroying his house. His voice cracked with sheer, unadulterated panic. He took a step back and looked at Director Davis with a look of pure terror and humiliation. Director Davis scowled deeply, waving his hand in front of his face to swat away the drywall dust. He turned to Jake and asked in a deep, authoritative voice, "What the hell is going on here, Jake? Is this the finished masterpiece you designed and invited me to see? Why are there strangers demolishing a brand new build?" Sarah didn't also give Jake a fraction of a second to invent an excuse. She calmly pulled down her respirator mask and smiled a shark-like grin. She reached over to the entryway console and picked up an iPad. On the screen was a live FaceTime call with me. From my car down on the street, I had a front row seat to the cheating man's complete destruction. Sarah stepped out into the hallway and shoved the recorded deed with the official state seal, along with the notarized closing documents, right into Director Davis's hands. She spoke loud and clear, ensuring both men heard every single syllable over the construction noise. Sarah announced, "Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. I'm sure you're very confused. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sarah, owner of a real estate brokerage here in Chicago, and the sole legal owner of Unit 12A. This condo was designed and paid for entirely by Emily, the soon-to-be ex-wife of your employee, using her own money. It was her separate premarital property. Yesterday, Emily sold it to me. Right now, my crew is knocking down a wall to remodel it to my liking." Director Davis looked down at the deed, examining it meticulously. The bold text bearing my name as the sole grantor, the recording dates, and the official notary seals proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Sarah's words were the absolute truth. He handed the documents back. His expression morphed from confusion to furious disgust, his eyes burning a hole through Jake. Sarah wasn't done. She proceeded to unload the entire bitter truth. She explained how Jake hadn't contributed a single cent to the purchase or the remodel. She exposed how he had blatantly lied to his boss, stealing the credit for his wife's hard work and money to polish his resume and steal the director job for the Aspen Resort. Sarah also didn't hold back on revealing how Jake had treated Emily, from secretly changing the locks to move his mother in to physically throwing a dirty cement rag at her face. Jake stood paralyzed, as pale as a ghost. His legs were visibly shaking, and cold sweat poured down his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but all his silver-tongued excuses died in his throat in the face of undeniable legal proof. The web of lies he had so carefully spun was brutally ripped apart, exposing a rotten, selfish, and greedy core. His master plan to use his wife's assets as a corporate stepping stone had been atomized. The atmosphere in the 12th floor hallway was suffocating. The screech of the drill continued to roar from inside the condo. But to Jake, the most terrifying sound in the world was the furious silence coming from Director Davis. "Mr." Davis stood up straight, adjusted his suit jacket, and took a deep breath to regain his executive composure. But his eyes were blazing with utter disappointment and contempt. Director Davis was a self-made businessman. He was legendary in the construction industry for valuing trust, professional ethics, and absolute integrity in his executives. To him, a man who couldn't even protect and respect his own wife could never be trusted to lead anything. The fact that Jake had concocted this elaborate, insulting lie to manipulate him for a promotion was an unforgivable insult to his intelligence. He stepped toward Jake. Jake dropped his head, his arms hanging limply at his sides, physically trembling as he awaited the verdict. Director Davis spoke with a low rumble, every word cutting like a machete. He said, "Jake, I have been in this business for 30 years. I have met a lot of brilliant people, and I have met a lot of con artists. But a man who uses his wife's blood, sweat, and money as a stepping stone, who lies directly to his superiors' faces the way you do, that is a special kind of low. You actually thought I was some old fool you could easily manipulate. You invited me here to show off your perfectly built life. You plan to use this whole charade to secure the Aspen project. What a joke. A man who robs his own home, who tramples on the woman who loved him. How in the hell could I ever trust you with tens of millions of dollars of my company's money?" Hearing his boss deliver the fatal blow, Jake's legs gave out. He lunged forward and desperately grabbed the sleeve of Director Davis's suit jacket. The pride of the successful executive vanished, replaced by the pathetic begging of a man clinging to a sinking ship. Jake pleaded, "Boss, please let me explain. It's not what she says. My wife misunderstood me. Please give me a chance. I'll prove my worth to you. I've dedicated years to this firm. You can't throw it all away over a family. Misunderstanding, please believe me." Director Davis violently yanked his arm away, showing zero mercy. He pulled a pocket square from his jacket and literally wiped down the sleeve where Jake had touched him, displaying a look of absolute revulsion. Director Davis declared firmly, "Do not use the word dedication with me. The company pays you a highly competitive salary for your labor, but we cannot pay to fix your lack of a moral compass. A project director requires above all else honesty and integrity. You have neither. I am officially informing you that your candidacy for the Aspen project is permanently revoked, and you are terminated from this firm effective immediately. Tomorrow morning, report to HR, hand in your laptop, and collect your final severance check. After that, never show your face in my building again. I do not employ scam artists." With that, Director Davis turned on his heel and walked with heavy commanding steps back toward the elevator. Jake watched in utter shock as the imposing figure of his boss disappeared behind the silver doors. It was over. Everything was gone. The career he had sacrificed his soul to build, the brilliant corporate future he had dreamed of. All of it had been incinerated in a single afternoon. The mask had been ripped off, revealing a harsh, brutal reality. Jake stumbled and collapsed to his knees on the cold hallway floor. He grabbed his hair and let out a guttural, agonizing scream of frustration. Sarah, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, watched the broken loser with total apathy. She raised a hand and signaled her crew to get back to work. The sledgehammers and drills roared back to life, completely drowning out the pathetic wailing of a greedy man. The universe had collected its debt much sooner than he had ever anticipated. The next morning, I put on a sharp beige trench coat, gathered all my documents, and drove straight to the office of a top-tier family law attorney in downtown Chicago. She was a bulldog litigator recommended by Sarah herself. I decided not to drag this out for another second. To remove a cancer, you have to cut it out aggressively, giving it zero chance to metastasize and infect the rest of your life. Sitting in her office, I laid out exactly what I wanted: an immediate unilateral filing for divorce. The attorney meticulously reviewed the evidence. I provided the marriage certificate that was barely a month old. The deed proving the condo was a premarital separate asset. The bank statements detailing the $50,000 I spent on the interior, and most importantly, the flash drive, containing the hidden camera footage documenting the psychological abuse Jake and his mother had inflicted on me. The attorney smiled a vicious, satisfied smile, assuring me the case was a slam dunk and victory was guaranteed. The divorce petition was filed at the county courthouse that very afternoon. The process moved relatively quickly since I had overwhelmingly provided all the necessary evidence. When he received the court summons, Jake was initially extremely combative. At the first mandatory mediation session, he showed up looking like a wreck, unshaven, disheveled, with eyes full of pure resentment. He flat out refused to sign the divorce papers. He aggressively demanded that the court split the $750,000 from the sale of the house right down the middle. He argued that since we were legally married, all assets liquidated during the marriage were marital property. He even demanded that I pay him compensatory damages for emotional distress for getting him fired and for destroying his reputation on social media. I sat across from him at the mediation table, maintaining the icy calm of a woman who had already severed all emotional ties. My attorney took immense pleasure in annihilating the delusions of this greedy man. She turned to the mediator and spoke with absolute authority. "Your Honor, based on the recorded deed dated June 15th, which is exactly 3 months before the parties signed their marriage license, this real estate is the sole and separate property of my client, under state law. My client's decision to liquidate her separate property is 100% within her legal rights. As for the $50,000 in renovations, we have provided certified bank statements, proving that the funds originated entirely from Miss Emily's personal accounts with zero commingling or contribution from Mr. Miller. Therefore, Mr. Miller's demand for a 50-over-50 split of the proceeds is entirely baseless, frivolous, and holds zero standing in a court of law." Jake's face fell. The reality finally set in that he didn't have a single piece of paper to prove he had contributed a dime. Verbal gaslighting and empty claims of "what's mine is yours" hold zero weight in front of a judge. The judge, after reviewing the filings and the hard evidence, determined that the marriage was irretrievably broken and advanced the case to a final ruling. On the day the judgment was handed down, a warm summer rain washed over Chicago. The judge's verdict echoed clearly through the solemn courtroom. The court granted my petition for divorce. Regarding the financials, the decree legally solidified that the condo and the $750,000 cash from its sale were my sole and separate property, and I was awarded 100% of the funds. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. If you enjoyed the story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep creating content.